Our goal today is to investigate the important ideas, achievements of scientists, philosophers in the scientific revolution in the Age of Enlightenment. These are two time periods when things are changing relatively rapidly. The way people think and the way governments form and all kinds of different aspects of society are changing. First, we're going to talk about some of these new scientists, these revolutionary thinkers like Copernicus and Galileo and Sir Isaac Newton and some of their ideas. So things are changing. We're gonna have this revolution in thought. But what did people think before it changed? Right before we have this change in scientific thought. If you had a question about the world, why does the sun and the moon move through the sky? Who would you ask? Right? If you're living in the Middle Ages, say 800 years ago, the year 1200 or so, you're living in Europe. You have a question about how the world works. You're probably going to go talk to the church, a priest, right? You would consult the Bible, and at this point, the Bible's still pretty much exclusively in Latin, right? So if you don't speak Latin, which most people did not, you got to go ask the priest. So he's the one who can read it, and you're too poor to afford a Bible anyway at that point. So because books are very expensive, so you have no idea, right? The priest can read the Bible, and he can look at the very first part where it says, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, and he's like, well, there it is. There's all the explanation you need, right? Or if he's really, really highly educated, he may know what the Greeks and the Romans wrote about it, right? He may know about some early Greek philosophers who observed the stars and had different ideas, and he may refer to those. But primarily, it's going to be the Christian Bible is the source of information. And there was, that's what it was. And if you question it, you got in trouble. So people like Nicholas Copernicus come along. They're observing. He's looking at the stars. He's looking at planets. He can tell that there's a difference, right? He can tell how he can see them moving through the sky. And he comes up with the idea. He's like, based on my observations, first, right? So most people at the time had the notion that the Earth was in the middle of the universe, right? God had put it there, and he put everything in motion nice and perfectly. It's all nice and circular, perfect circles, and it all makes sense. It's nice and orderly. Copernicus is looking, he's like, that doesn't make any sense, right? Based on my observations, it's chaos out there, right? There's, and we're definitely not in the middle of it. It looks like we are going around the sun just like the other planets that I've observed. However, he is smart or cowardly, however you want to look at it. He doesn't publish his work, or his work is not published until after he dies, because he knows he might get in trouble with the church. So he dies, then his work is published, and people start to look at it. People like Galileo, they read his work, and Galileo's like, yeah, that makes sense to me. But he is still alive, Galileo, when he says this, and he gets in trouble with the Catholic Church. Right? Copernicus is like, yeah, it's heliocentric. It looks like the sun is in the middle. And the Catholic Church puts him in jail for it. And they make him say, never mind, I lied. They make him recant and take it back. That's the only way he's allowed to not rot in prison. And he observes things with his he didn't invent the telescope, but he certainly used it, right? And invented new types of lenses and things like that for the telescope, which were very useful. You have people like Isaac Newton, right, who is making his own observations about astronomy and things like that, but he starts to think about the laws that govern the natural world, right? The laws that set things in motion and keep everything in order, or the order that it's in, at least, in the universe. And one day, the story goes, he's sitting on an apple tree, and an apple falls, right? Hits his head in some stories. And he has the idea of gravity, right? What made that fall? There's a force called gravity, and there's all these other forces, laws of motion. And he starts to come up with these ideas. It even goes as far as to invent calculus to explain those ideas. So, he helps lay the foundation of how we think about physics and the laws of motion and gravity, up until Albert Einstein comes along and kind of throws a wrench into some of his ideas. But people are still influenced by Newton and his the things he came up with. And you can take calculus in 11th and 12th grade, right? You can thank Sir Isaac Newton for that one. So before, you'd ask an authority, you'd ask the king, you'd ask the church about how the world works. After the scientific revolution, who do you ask? How do you think? Right? The answer is you don't have to ask anybody, right? You can think for yourself. You can make your own observations, or you can ask a scientist who is making observations, right? So there's a definite kind of changing of attitudes about who the authority is and who can ask questions and who is allowed to be questioned. And so the world is changing, and it will continue to change. We'll talk about the Enlightenment next.